Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Political Agenda. With me, PJ Thum, your host, and also co-hosting once again today, Editor-in-Chief of Wake Up Singapore, Sean Francis Han. How are you today,
glad
Sean?
to be. Yeah, I'm great. I'm really excited. Rap music, something that I grew up with. Super excited to get into this. And yes, we have, of course, Subhas, right? One of the big rappers, activists in Singapore. One of the young figures that's coming up, doing things and saying things that I think are going to be particularly interesting, right? Seeing seeing the way that he's sort of combining his art, combining that activism. I'm quite excited to get into this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome
It's
to
an
you.
honor. I followed your stuff for a while, and so it's an honor to be
Oh,
on the
no.
program.
The
Really.
honor is all ours. I am just so excited by this rising generation of activists who are combining so many different things in such unique ways and doing it in ways, I think, which, if I can feel a bit old and say my generation weren't able to, right? And the breadth of possibilities that I see every week talking to all of you is really exciting. And I think you personally embody a lot of this because you're a musician, you are an activist, you were an athlete, right? Still an athlete.
I still you just give me a couple of months to train, I might still be able to dunk.
And the things we were talking about before, philosophy, right? You're a thinker, you're a Renaissance man.
Oh wow.
How do you fit all that into your life? I feel like I've had a full life, but I listen to some of the things that you do, how you talk, how you think, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. How old are you actually?
I'm 28 this year, 92 baby.
Oh my god.
You round that up a few times. I'm a pretty old veteran in the game already. No, but it's interesting because for me, I draw a lot of inspiration from the work that the New Narrative does. And like yourself, Jonathan, the people who have been on this podcast. So for me, I don't see them as silos or separate tracks. I see a lot of the work as connected and just we must be organized that way. We must be in touch. We must be connected because we need all these modes, all these art forms, different modes of writing, thinking to get us to, because it's all collective. So I draw a lot of inspiration from the work of the people around me who may not be artists or hip-hop, creators. So yeah, and that's so for me, I mean Renaissance man is a really huge tag. I think a lot of the work is undoing, especially because I walk around with cis hetero privilege. I'm an able-bodied person, and I've had a chance to go to different educational institutions, a lot of that because I could shoot threes and dunk a basketball.
Right.
But I'm punching above my weight class. I'm not supposed to be here right now, This is me, despite the system, despite a lot of things, to be here. And so for me, this platform, this work is all about like what we can do together to make sure that people don't have to be in certain situations that I've seen, I've experienced, and that if you ask me to sum it up, I put it in a song. I'm a chronic overthinker with a woeful inability to cherish. So I'm just trying to figure this out, and I just love doing the work that I do.
So I think the question like that we should just jump into right now is how you got this way, how you became this Renaissance man, right? So I know that there are a lot of things that have shaped and molded and influenced you, right? So tell us a bit more about your personal life, right?
Right. So I have a beautiful family.
Nice.
My mom and sister are so we just lost our dad earlier this month. So it's been a really tough time because it's been a lot of my childhood has been defined by the absence of male role models, and a lot of like how I am today is because of the women in my life who have invested time, who have just set me on that right track, for me not to repeat those intergenerational habits and cycles. And so today I would be like I would be repeating a lot of the addictions and a lot of the patriarchic systems, if not for these people. So I have a beautiful family. My sister is one of the most she's just the coolest person I know. She's my best friend. Y'all know Preeti, my sister. Yeah. And my mom is the strongest woman I know. And so, and And so a lot of this is me looking at my life as just a period of consciousness between like two eternities that I will never understand, and just understanding that it is a privilege to be able to have a platform, articulate even something that I'm thinking. Because for the longest time as a kid, I was facing a lot. I was doing a lot. I was alone. I was like, looking back, I was depressed as a kid, and it was through like, I put on headphones to escape from arguments in the house. I went down to escape to the basketball courts to like leave that trauma and to find something that I could be good at, that I could invest time and energy and effort and improve, you know. So, and I read up because I wanted to escape this reality. So a lot of that is trying to understand and situate myself in all of this, and then figuring out that the self is not even just mine. It is all of ours. And so it's community care, it's community healing that is necessary. And so that's why I do a lot of the work that I do today, because I understand that like it's all interconnected. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so how did you move into activism? What sort of lit that fire inside of you?
Denise Phua lit
Right.
that fire. Okay, Denise Phua. When Denise Phua is the MP of Jalan Besar, who when they said like, you know, the walking, these big congregations of people in Little India were walking time bombs, that lit something off in me. And I wrote a song, like the first two lines are, Denise Phua called my people walking time bombs. Then how come I haven't blown up with all of my songs? So it's like that comment specifically kind of made me like, all right, all of my life, I was in university when that happened, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to be an urban studies major, and I'm going to write about this, and I want to do work to because this sucks. I mean, who was she talking about? You know, and I know like she has later apologized for that, and I've actually had a conversation with Denise Phua about that after when I saw her at an event, to let her know that, hey, it's just strictly business. Like, I mean, this I referenced this quote in a song, and I understand you do a lot of work with disabilities, but you are part. This is about systems, and this is, look who is her running mate this year. Like who's in Jalan Besar this year is Josephine Teo. You know, so I mean like, it's all like, even like the Louis Ngs of the world and all that, we don't buy that. You know, we don't. I mean, you do more for like activism for stray cats than for people who are facing the gallows. You know, it's all very, to me, it's all, they are the shiny smiling boys next doors. You know, for the kind of insidious violence that that the PAP and this country does. You know, so for me, how I got this way is it's not like someone came into my life to radicalize me or something. It's just me looking at this and like, this is not okay. Like thinking for like independently and talking to people and understanding like that, like we don't have any press freedom. That's why New Narrative is so important. You know, that's why Wake Up Singapore is so important, because it's alternative voices, and we don't have space for those voices, because I feel like my voice is an alternate voice. Like I didn't growing up around me is like, all the juxtapositions, like we haven't had a house, like public housing, right? Affordable public housing, as they say. We haven't had a house. We haven't been able to afford a down payment on a house for like 12 years. Today we're still living in a flat that we have to rent. And like, so what is this like when we stand up for National Day, you know, stand up for Singapore, and we say all these things, and what are we putting on a pedestal? You know, so for me, like, it's always been, I've been very at conflict with this idea of,
I mean, a lot of people look at things that are happening around them and they're not okay with it, but they don't feel that impetus to change things, or they feel a sense of hopelessness that the system and the structure is so massive, right? Not just spatially, but temporally. So it's this huge machinery. So what makes you feel like, you know, I got to go out there and do something?
It's just I have something to say, and that's that. And I don't seek permission or forgiveness. I just look at the people around me and have these conversations, and that's why I chose to do like hip hop. That's why I'm rapping, because I know that, first of all, it's a medium that the state will never be able to control. The state, you will never be able to control hip hop. Hip hop is bigger than one artist, one person. It is to me like they will try to co-op and put it on National Day stages. They will try to censor, you know, and try to have NAC grants and terms and conditions, but we don't give up, you know. So so that's why for me, it's really combining the the medium, something that hip hop raised me. Men in hip hop raised me. Women in hip hop raised me. One of my favorite rappers is No Name. I'm sure I don't know if you should check out No Name's music, and their book club. But the point is, for me, I've always been like, I would be that kid in school that would get in trouble because I didn't put my hand on my chest for the pledge. Like I would be in detention at Hwa Chong. I would get in trouble. I got suspended by the dean. Because because we were going to NS, and there's a psychological trauma that young boys go through, man. Like what if like you're a conscious objector, or what if you just don't want to spend 2 years of your life serving a cause that you don't believe in? And what if you're an athlete like myself and like many others, like and don't have the kind of money like some people might to go and father fly you here, mother fly you there, like. It kills our artists, it kills our dreams, it kills all those things, and I think it's violent. It's violent to tell someone that. Yeah, just because you're born with a dick on your in your body, like and again, there's so much that goes on around that too. Like who needs to serve? Like how do non-male identifying people like in NS like what space do they have? You know what I mean? So, but the point is like. I got in trouble because I started a Facebook group, and this was like back when Facebook just started or something, right? And then I had a Facebook group, and I had a title that was pretty direct about how I felt about Singapore. And then the principal sat me down with one of my close friends until today. He's we were on the basketball team together, and we sat at this huge boardroom because Hwa Chong is like IP program, right? So this is basically the man who's in charge of like.
In a boardroom, though.
Yeah, in his
that's
boardroom.
Quite like, that's intimidation, right?
For a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting on the other side, and he's saying, like, how dare you insult the country that I served 2 years in? And then, like, so I'm like, yo, how much of your value as a human being is derived from, like, this false sense of patriotism that you have? Like, aren't you supposed to be educating, nurturing young folk? And so, yeah, for me, a lot of that was, like, growing up, like, defiantly like fuck the rules. I know sorry, you gotta cut that out. But then it's like yeah, I don't want to do this thing, and everybody's like I've been gaslighted into leading me to believe that that's the only way. No. So today that's something I firmly believe, like we must abolish NS. Yeah.
Right. It sounds like you're responding very much to a certain sense of misplaced authority, right? In the sense of you're talking about these authority figures who believe that they should have authority over you, whether it's the state or your principal, purely because of the positions they hold and the accident of your birth. But the fact is, countries, it's a two-way street. Countries should also earn our loyalty, earn our respect by being places that we are proud of being part of, that we are happy to be, give our loyalty to, that we are happy to support.
Correct.
Right? We shouldn't be blindly, mindlessly following whatever the people in charge of a country decides. History is full of examples of how that is not a good thing, to put it mildly. Right? And so it sounds like one of the forces that's really shaped your life has been a sort of, I don't know if it's a patriarchy or authority or a combination of both, but a response to a lack thereof, growing up in an environment which showed you an alternative, and then going through experiences where that authority was like needlessly, mindlessly hostile.
Absolutely. And that there wasn't space for people to have alternative or dissenting voices, and that is really what it was. Because if we didn't sign the social contract, that's it. Like that's the most important thing. Didn't sign off on that, and so at least if there was, it's not just the your participatory democracy. Hey, you come to a Meet the People session, share, and then go home, and the same thing still happens. It's really that unlegitimate feedback mechanisms, not just feedback. We're just not here to give feedback, but building. We want to build. We want to be a part of. We want to be invested. We want to put that sweat equity and see like a future that is shared. We want the license to dream, and so that because we don't have the space, not only in actual like tangible like policy making, like sitting down with people to be at the table to make these decisions, but also in the arts, in the media, and even in schools. Like it's just to indoctrinate young minds. So, or even in like questioning our history. So I think that's where it becomes like an all-encompassing, like, can you imagine? I mean, we all lived through that, like this in some form or fashion. So that was really like something that shaped a lot of like how I am today, because I know what that feels like, and I don't want young people to feel that way. And I also know that a lot of this, if left unchecked, leads to a lot of the narratives that we see coming up from like people, like even my peers, like, you know, like, oh, you know, even like, we're going to talk about the death penalty later, even like, you know, something like, if we don't have the death penalty, then this, you know, and it's a lot of like just reproduction of these
bad arguments.
Yeah, super bad arguments that the state has kind of manipulated. Yeah.
So how did you get into rap and hip hop? Why was that? Like, what got you into that as a way of sort of navigating this mess that we have here?
I really just love listening to hip hop. Like hip hop raised me, really did. And it's so listening to not only the music, right?
Yeah.
But it's the interviews, the actions of like so many people in hip hop. And we must say hip hop is a black art form, and we must acknowledge that we are guests in the house of hip hop. And so for me, a lot of like even like recently with what has been happening since as long as I can remember in America, the violence against black bodies, like that's something that we have as people who are members of hip hop in Singapore. We have to be using our platforms and also like be doing anti-racist work in Singapore, but also paying homage, paying like donating money, like, you know, doing things that are really tangible, that also like give back and contribute to hip hop. So for me, if someone can't do those things, then their contribution back to hip hop should be doing their work in situ, like where they are. And so for me, that's how a lot of my work is shaped. But when I was in my fourth year, actually I wanted to drop out of school many times. The only reason that I stayed in school was because my mom only got a chance to go to secondary school. So I kept that image of me, and like I know that I wasn't just me walking the stage. It was always gonna be my mom and I. And so just that was a super important thing for me to stay in school, to keep to keep up and to be consistent there. But for me, in that last year, it was like everybody around us is like, you know, filling out a resume, going to the professional experience center, and I was just like, I'm not about to make rich people richer. Like, what is the role of the university? Because if it's just, you know, to have a nice shiny first line, you know, went to this liberal arts, that, you know, then we're failed lah. Because what duty does a university graduate have towards justice-oriented work, towards ending systems of oppression? If not, then it's just a place to collect and corporatize young people. Right? Yeah. So for me, it's really like, okay, what do I love? What am I good at? I don't really care about money. Like today, look, I don't really even sell anything. I'm or what I do. I'm just, music is free. This is our stories, our songs. I'm just someone who interprets them in a rap song, in an MP3. You know, so for me, it is just about like, I have so many thoughts and so many ideas. I need a medium, and I need a medium also to bookmark these moments in my life, because I forget. Because we took a lot of photos, you know, as kids, but these photos like that I need to get out on like pen, and I need to like paint for myself. And so that's really what this is, just bookmark moments, and then it's commitments to putting work, like to doing the work in between songs. That so that's really why I started rapping, because I didn't go to university to get a job. I went there to understand my place in this country, and how I can like do the work.
So who are some of like the big influences on you? Some big rappers, big artists that have really like, you know, changed your life, really affected you?
Right, really No Name. No Name is like, I would love to meet No Name one day and like to put a song out together, or just be in the same space or read the same book, like in her book club. So No Name is huge. Definitely Kendrick. I like grew up listening to like Kendrick, Section 80, all the freestyles, everything. Like, so I've kind of grown up with Kendrick. But so many others like Danny Brown, very alternate voices, like, you know, even so many. I love Pusha, Benny the Butcher, like so many. I listen to like all types of rap music. It's not just only like Immortal Technique and like J. Cole, you know. So it's like a lot of also in languages I don't understand. Yeah. Because I listen to this Iranian singing like quartet, like, and they had like incorporated hip hop into it, and like a rap verse. So I listened to a lot of different sounds and songs because I mean it's all energy. It's all energy and how it makes you feel. So yeah, but big rappers, like those are the big names, and yeah, beyond that is really a lot of like thinkers and like a lot of conversations, like everyday people. So I think I draw inspiration from just like the conversation I had in the car here was with a Grab driver about the death penalty. Like that is inspirational. Like I write songs about the varicose veins on the coffee shop auntie's like legs without being creepy. But anyway, that's the scale that I care about, like everyday life. Yeah.
So so tell us about like your music. What is it that you think hip hop or rap can do or achieve that is sort of unique to the art form? What's powerful about it?
Well, to start a revolution. That's what we can do. That's what we're supposed to do. For me, So for me, like, it's just so like it's sacred almost, like the art form, and for me, it has changed my life. And so it has the power to inspire people to do things, to think differently, to act differently, to love, to share, to have a different relationship with their own realities, because it has for me. And so, yeah, I think the role of the artist is not up to me to decide. Like what kind of music someone should make is again not up to me to decide. But if you only take money from the state, especially in this context, if you only take money from the state, and then you reproduce certain narratives and be on certain stages, but without critiquing those stages. So I'm okay. I've performed it with Earth Hour at MBS, but not without first starting the show off with saying it is not lost on me the irony of us standing here and having an Earth Hour event on reclaimed sand. You know, and discussing, and we have to use those platforms, and we have to find co-conspirators, because it's people who are putting like who are hiring artists to come on those stages. They have to understand the work. They have to understand the intention, the purpose, and it takes a bit more work. Sit down, get a coffee, explain that this is beyond the music. This is more than just music. This is like, how can we really work together to do something? How can we make sure the way we do things now sets the tone for how things need to be done in the future? So for me, it's like, see, I strayed so far away from the question. Where?
But I mean, we were talking about your influences, but you brought up a very interesting point there, which is the importance of independence in music production.
Absolutely.
Because I think there's a lot of music out there, not just in Singapore but globally as well, that is very constricted by their record label, and that takes away the power or the freedom for them to critique.
Yes.
Now you yourself, you're an independent artist,
Absolutely,
right? So you have full control over the narrative, full control over what you want to say, the ideas you want to push. Tell us a bit more about that. That, you know, you want to be able to say the things that you want to do, but at the same time, how do you keep it sustainable? What has the experience been as an independent artist in Singapore?
So for me, that is like a very, very important thing. That's something I champion all the time to artists around me. It's that own your shit, like own your IP, own your masters. Why should a international record label like have control of those things? And I mean, look, to me, the NAC is like antithetical to the work that we need to do. We should stop using, like, to me, if possible, because of course, like, and for me, it's on two levels, right? Number one is like getting artists to see that you don't need the NAC to start doing anything. Like, so for me, by existing and doing this work, I'm resisting by showing a different pathway to how someone can be not necessarily successful, but can flourish and thrive and can grow as an artist. So that's one. And number two is actually, so like in a way, it's creating an alternate system on its own, that just doesn't care what the state does. You can do what you want to do. We're doing this over here. And but very importantly, from a young, and this is like, there's so many young brown like artists from the working class who are making this music, who are sharing their working class experiences for a record label to exploit. You know, it's about also understanding that, okay, if we're gonna get record deals, then we need unions. Like, artists need to be able to self-organize to demand better, to demand like, okay, yes, you might have to, it might be time bound, your that we are us allowing you to distribute, to kind of own this music, and then after that it should go to the estate. It should go to like a 21-year-old artist. That money for centuries or whatever might come from that work, right? However it gets amplified down the line, the family should reap the benefits. You should get to decide. That should be in your will. So for me, like it's also first of all, it's why we make music. You know, why do we even do this in the first place? Is it just to make money, like get a quick buck from a record label and say whatever needs to be said, say whatever the audience wants to hear? Because this industry is super insidious. Even from the DSPs, like this, like someone's probably hearing this podcast on Spotify. Like we take 0.4 cents on a stream. How do you feed a family or anything in Singapore with that kind of return? So to me, it's like super exploitative, and I'm always gonna be for independent artists to make your own platforms and create pathways for other people to thrive. Yeah.
But let's say we're not taking money from the state, right? How do we make this work? How does one make a hip hop career in Singapore work?
I mean, really any sort of musical career, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just hip hop, but I think all musicians,
Yeah.
artists in general, even. Right, or even with New Narrative as a platform, we have a lot of comic artists, and again, right, how on earth do people, in this hyper neoliberal capitalist region of the world that is Southeast Asia, how on earth do we make a living when we produce something which we want to resist commodification and we want to resist corporatization?
I mean, that's really hard to resist, because at some point, like you gotta survive lah. And so, I mean, for me, it's who gets what that money is used for, and who gets what share of the pie is really important. Along following those questions, first of all, people need to be thinking about these things, right? And for me, how I've kind of navigated that is like through Patreon. I know a lot of like artists and workers and sex workers who use OnlyFans, as independent income streams. So I mean, like those things, like they work. I don't know if I think was New Narrative on Patreon ever?
I was on Patreon.
I remember. Yeah, I saw
but,
your.
we tried to build our own membership system so that the pie we get to keep more of the pie.
Absolutely, and that's what it is. Because all these things cost money, they are time that you should be paid for. So I think that like that's really important. It's about just owning that and like and helping each other to set that up. So for me, again, artists don't need, like, if you think about it, right, someone like I have a Patreon, and that allows me to actually keep doing the hustles that I do, because like I mean I don't make, like, if you go and add up all my streams on every song ever, it's not enough. The money made is not enough to put towards mixing fees for one song. So why am I putting songs on Spotify anymore? My next album is going to be on USB, physical release only. Yeah. So,
but then people can't download it anywhere.
Maybe it's on Bandcamp, but yeah. So maybe like that. But like because I own all my masters, what I can do is I can sell you a USB, and I can say, hey, my next album I want to put out like sell 5,000 units at $20 each. I want to make 100K and put it to a HDB down payment, and I want to get out of here.
Right.
That's the plan. So my thing is, I can put all my songs I've ever made onto that USB and give it to you, because I own my music. I don't have to ask anybody about that. So I think that kind of leeway, flexibility, and also I can distribute however I want, because the music is ours. That these songs are going to mean something to the people listening to them. It's not just me. Like Subhas is like a persona, but then like these songs are about us. They're for us to think, us to ponder, us to like be inspired to create more. So yeah, I think there's many ways around that. And there may be so many ways that I don't know, but people need to the first kind of like starting point shouldn't just be like, hey, NEC got what? Like NEC got what grant? Where can I perform? Don't worry about that. Like we have IG Live. You can do this on your own. Yeah.
So you just casually dropped there that you have an album upcoming. Right? So you sort of teased us on that. Tell us more about that album and any upcoming projects that you have.
Right. So I'm working on an album called Tabula Rasa. Latin for like the script tablet. But I mean, it's supposed to be read Tabula Rasa, which is like, cannot feel, cannot experience, cannot taste. And so the question is really like, it's linked to even like the map behind us, like, who gets the right to write and draw, and what narratives get prioritized, and what must be anesthetized. Like what gets, it's an album about erasure. Yeah.
Sounds like a kind of conceptual album. Is there a...
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
wow.
So I mean, my first album was not a public assembly, and that was, very much inspired by Jollivan's work, by Kirsten's work, and it's you know, it's to say like, yo, this is it. This is like a bunch of life experiences, and we're here, and we're unapologetically here, and this is what it is. This is hip hop, like, you know, and so this, like, I mean, I keep things like for album wise very like conceptual to tell a story, because for me, for someone to sit down and listen to this podcast, this video, an album, like that means they're investing time in their life, which is the most sacred thing, the most important thing. They're putting that time to you, to believe that, like, you know, you're gonna bring them somewhere.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's how I curate things, knowing that someone is on that journey, and this is a short period of time that we have together, just like how life is. And my job in that album or in a space is to leave it in a better state than how I entered it. So same with my life. Like, that's the mantra I go with. So same with the album is like to at the end of it, as someone listens from top to bottom, there needs to be some kind of change or some kind of transformation. But it links to the idea of tabula rasa. So it's some kind of erasure and scraping of this palimpsest of maybe who they are or what they think about a certain idea or topic that I talk about. So yeah, it's I keep albums conceptual that way lah.
So before I put money down on the pre-order, where do you have a due date?
No, I
for
don't.
this?
I don't. It's been really rough, because especially like, look, to me, there's all the other works that I do are more important than the music. Like everything else I'm doing. So whether it's the Men with Pens project that I was working with Beyond Social Services and a Substation, whether it's currently right now, the moment we're in, it's anti-death penalty advocacy, all those things are more important than an album. Because, I mean, that's the most important thing. We have to, what's the point? I'm not going to prioritize writing a song over writing a petition to help save someone, to bring awareness to help saving
I
someone.
mean, there's a greater urgency towards
Of course,
those issues.
of course. So the album, there's no due date, because I'm an independent artist. I when it's done, it's done. You know.
Yeah, I really feel you though, because when in trying to build New Narrative as a platform and then create an opportunity for all the cool stories that are out there in Southeast Asia to be told, right? Whether podcast, comic, or whatever. I am also an independent artist in the sense of academics. We write independently and we publish independently, and I never have time to finish my book, or do more writing. And then you always end up in this situation where, well, there's always more emergencies coming up. That's the nature of activism, but carving out time for yourself is also really important, and your artistic output is also going to make a huge difference, taking that long view. So it's something I struggle with, and there's no easy answer, but I would urge you, as soon as you can, like finish it.
Yeah. And I think what you brought up something important, which is taking care of yourself.
Yes.
And boundaries are important. Like you don't have to engage with every single comment on every single post. I think, and I think those communities of care are really important. The support structure. So going back to family, like mom, sis, the homemade meals that I eat with my hands, and the lingering smell of like my mom's makan on my fingers, those things are like, to me, like they ground me, they keep me like aligned, and they are really, really important. Those are the most important things to me. Those very small moments that like that of care and of love, and that inspires me the most. So and
so
then sleep is important.
Before we move on, there's so much to talk about though. You keep bringing up really important things. I have a question about accessibility of your work, because you talk about respecting the time of the listener, and about reaching directly to your audience. How do you balance between making your work accessible to a broader audience to try and get your message out, versus staying true to the sort of artistic vision that you want to achieve with your work, and more specifically, right? Hip hop has a very passionate but limited audience, and one that might probably already overlap more with the people who are more inclined to hear your message. How do we reach beyond that, especially as an artist? People ask me to make my work easier to read, more accessible, right? But I'm like, that is not the vision that I have for my work.
Right.
They ask me to make my videos shorter, dumb it down even more, or be less snarky, right? And I'm like, that's not who I am, right? I want to stay true to me and what I want to achieve.
Yeah.
So how do you balance this with your work, right? Especially when you work in a medium that has so many negative as well as positive, right? But negative, and I think the conservative right in the US has really attacked the medium you work in and given it a very bad name. I was going to say bad rap. Very bad name. How do you overcome all this?
I mean, same in Singapore also. What the conservative, like even like you just look at what happened to Preeti and I 2 years ago. Rap is only amenable when it's like serves those in power. It serves the elite. So when you start talking about anything about how racist this country is or how oppressive systems are for the most vulnerable, like songs get pulled, you never get invited to shows and all that stuff. So that's why, again, creating your own independent platforms is really important, so that you never are too entangled in those things. And I wouldn't never accept money from the state. Like, it would be like it would be songs about it if they even try to offer me anything. like fuck off, like that's not what we're doing over here. But what I mean, to answer your question, I think it's really to me it's about putting legs behind the work. Because I mean, my songs on these platforms or whatever, they're not like, I don't want them to just work as like museum pieces that people can go and see and like, oh, okay, that was what's happening in 2018. Nah, like I want them to be to be like moments spark points that we can all like say, okay, that's where we're at right now. Here's what we need to do. And even like certain words, like even like the a lot of them are also from my urban studies background. Like the Javon's paradox, for example. That's something where if you increase like for example, you build. I just shared. So it's like if you build a road that's 3 lanes and then you build an extra lane, you think, oh, it eases traffic, but no, actually, convenience or like making something more efficient increases consumption. There's going to be more cars on the road. So it's kind of like that's the paradox. So I have that in my song, like in a song, and I think for me, it's about being ready to put that in a song, okay, because that's something that's immortal, that's something that's going to live forever, and that's my artistic vision of how I want to say things. But also it's saying, okay, I'm also going to be on IG Live. I'm also going to be ready for any in-person conversation. Anybody sees me anywhere and it comes and says like, hey, you said this on your song. Okay, my first thing is that you got time? Let's stop. Are you going this way? I would go out of the way to just have a conversation. So doing those things and making ourselves available to having those conversations is really important. But then that goes back to our first point, which is how you're going to create those boundaries, because you can't do it all the time. So it's really about identifying the bad faith actors, the worst faith actors, and just be like, all right, no, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Like, you don't have to understand this. Like, I got to stay focused on like people who are actually genuinely in my DMs or reaching out or who sit down with me, who want to be ready to unpack, because I'm ready to be wrong. I'm ready to say like, you know what? Yeah, okay, there's going to be growth. And that's why I put stuff out, because I might write a second song. Like, I mean, there are songs I regret. I wrote a song called DNA that stands for Dad Not Around. And my dad had a chance to, like, my dad told me that he heard that song and he was very proud of me. And like this whole month, I've not been able to, physically, I've looked at it and I've not been able to click the song to listen back to that since my dad passed. And it's like, you go back and you think like, why do I get a chance to write? Like, I didn't want to write. Like, after it happened, I didn't want to write. Like, why do I, who am going through so much stuff at home and like my peers are making $7,000, $8,000 a month, and I'm here like every month still supporting other artists. I only work with like other independent artists who are all friends and all that. Pay everybody, every single person, and do all this and like get health insurance. And by the time I pay rent, I don't have any savings. Like, why? Like, I don't deserve to do this. I always feel that there's a lot of imposter syndrome in the work that I do. Not the work that I do, but in how I feel like every day. And that's why it's important to have that community, to stay inspired by people who are doing different things. Because if I just looked at hip hop and I just like, oh, why don't my peers understand me? It's really hard. Yeah. So for me, it's being ready to have those conversations, being ready to say, you know what, maybe I was limited in how I was thinking or feeling about this, and let's figure this out together. So it's really an invitation. So that's how.
So speaking about conversations that you have, right? So I mean, one thing that I've noticed is that you do a lot of Instagram Live. You have a lot of these conversations. You really utilize the platform in a way that I mean, at Wake Up Singapore, we always say like we should get on it, and then we kind of never, because it's so great. Like you're responding to these people in real time, having
Right.
these discussions, right? How has that been? How has that been for you? How did you get that idea?
Because I think like yeah, I think for me, like I think some artists like this mystique about like, oh, you know, you never see them unless there's an album release. I'm like, yo, life is short lah. Like tomorrow's not guaranteed. I want to make sure all this is out there because one day like my sister's gonna watch this video, and like so are you guys, so am I. Like we're gonna watch like every one of our like someone who came before us and their work, and inspiration comes from in spirit, right? It comes from inspirare to like to basically the work must continue. And for the work to continue, then we have to be vocal. We have to let people know which side of history we stand, what we believe, where we have to be vulnerable that way. And for me, it's all about that. So you see me on Instagram Live, and I make teas so that I can wear the same thing every day. Seriously. So the point is like people see me in my house, and I'll be talking about whatever, and whatever people want to talk about, we can discuss. And it's good because it allows me to understand where my gaps are. In like, because someone would bring up a comment, they would say something, or they would like tell me, oh, you know, have you read this form of communism? And then I'm like, no, I haven't. Let me go check that out. And then I do some reading and I come back and we can talk about it. Sometimes I just listen to a podcast and have IG Live on, and then we can pause and we can talk about something. So for me, it's like, I also don't like going out of the house. You will never catch me like at a club or at a this or that. I'm really like only go to family run cafes near my house, and I sit out in my house and I spend a lot of time with my Singapore special, my little dog, and my family. And so IG Live is a way that I can interact with people without interacting with people. Yeah.
Another thing that I've noticed is that on Instagram Live, in the conversations that you have, you draw from a very big pool of data, specifically the conversations that you have with migrant workers. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think okay. So with migrant workers, first of all because I was thinking a lot about like, you know, origin, about root, like why do I care? Because for me, it's also important to let people know that. So if there's a way that they can get involved, they can start, right? But actually for me, it started from my mom. Like she would always make extra makan at home, like she would make lunch or something. And then she had this police system that we used to live in Block 101, Sunset Way. And she would like actually like, because she's lazy to go down and come up, right? So she would actually ask the migrant worker cleaners who are cleaning the block, and she would put down a pulley to give them some makan or some water, and the days would be so hot, I remember. So, and then that's how actually, and mom would sometimes say like, okay, the pulley's broken or the hook is not working, go and do this, like go and pass this to the workers who are downstairs. And so it's actually those friendships, you know, and the workers will always take care of us. Like whenever we played basketball, there would be the workers would have a cleaning quarters or something. The ball would roll there, they would pass it back, we ask them to come and play. You know, they were like, oh, cannot, we have to work. And then we're like, no, you don't, just come and play. You know, so it's like it's always built. It's through friendship. It's through like also seeing that like, hey, we are diaspora. Like seeing a lot of like Tamil migrant workers who were in Singapore, and just knowing that like, yo, what's the difference between you and me? Geographical destiny and life chances. That's about it. Like knowing also that a lot of people and I mean a lot of these, not just male migrant construction workers, but like sex workers or domestic helpers, these transient workers in Singapore. It's like I don't think of myself just because I have a red passport or just because I was born here or had certain experiences. My life is not worth more than anybody else's, you know. And so for me, it's the stories and because there's a systemic silencing of migrant voices and narratives, it's really important for us as artists who have a platform to also be sharing that platform, sharing the stage, not just not just when CNA wants you to do it and then like, oh, can you come make a song together, but actually genuine friendships, genuinely like loving and caring and just being there for each other, or supporting my just friends. These are just my friends. And when look at what happened this year, it's shame. It's shame. I'm embarrassed to call myself Singaporean. You know, I don't. I'm Southeast Asian, right? But also like that's something I do. Like I really like. I'm Southeast Asian, brown. You know, so I think really like I'm embarrassed of how our country has treated migrant workers for so long. it's just so exploitative. When I went to, I mean, I don't know if you have any like Hindu, so I'm not a religious person, but my dad was, and I'm sorry I keep circling back to my dad because that's how I've been thinking about things. But when we went to light his Atma Shanti light, which is basically a light, you go to the temple, you pray for the soul to travel in peace, and then when you went to light the lamp, right? Then I start realizing that, you know, the priest was ringing off names like, you know, names, like, you know, this person's Atma Shanti, this person's Atma Shanti, all their souls. And then you start looking around you and like, these are all migrant workers. Like all these names that this person just said, right, are all names of migrant workers who have passed, and their friends and families like paying tribute to them. And then after that, you see when my sister was lighting the lamp, like it's around us, it's all just like, yeah, migrant workers. They're not like Singaporean, like Indian folks. I mean, some of them were, but a lot of them were migrant workers. So you start to see like, then you start to wonder questions like, what happens when a migrant worker dies in Singapore in the time of like COVID right now, and like what. It's so traumatic. I mean, I don't know how to even begin thinking about it. But these are human beings. Like, these are like the fact that I need to say that, ridiculous. But our country doesn't treat them like human beings. They don't see them as equal. So we have to do the work now. We have to remind them that like, nope, you serve us, ministers and president and everybody, and we need these are inalienable rights, and we need a baseline of like humanity, and we need. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you're in Singapore, there needs to be that needs to be ensured. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's heavy. That's really heavy stuff. And I remember, you know, back when things were going down, when there were suicides at the dorms, and you were outraged and you were railing against just the horrible conditions and the horrible culture as well that surrounds these issues, right? You know, the fact that people can come out and pretend or gesture in Parliament like they really actually care about these issues, right? It's something that it always catches me off guard. It's such a disgusting situation. But let's.
No, but you know the thing is, I spoke to a friend. And he told me the first thing I called him when all this was happening, I was like, because we had a short window to get like any kind of groceries or anything like rice, and just like to meet him and just pass him some stuff. He lives in one of these dorms, and he told me like, Subhas, next thing you know is going to be like suicides. He told me, and like, so for me to like hear that, but yet be like, what do you do? Like, what can you do other than organize, raise awareness? But I'm done raising awareness. We all know already what. What's new? You know what I mean? New will be statistics, and I don't want any more statistics. This have to change. So for me, it's we know what's gonna happen, and look at like it's just a sick state of affairs in Singapore, and we just do what we can with the time we have.
I think a point I want to make also, I think that needs to be made is, especially for a lot of people who might be listening, I mean, I think it's a point that's been made already, is that it's not just migrant workers, right? The government, the PAP government, encourages us to distinguish between their humanity and our humanity as Singaporeans, but the system also dehumanizes Singaporeans, and it also treats us terribly, and then encourages us to think, oh well, but at least we're not as badly treated as migrant workers.
Absolutely.
But it shouldn't be that way, right? We should all be treated as human beings. So, you know, one thing I would encourage people to think about is not just the dehumanization of migrant workers, but that us Singaporeans are also dehumanized through the system, where we're reduced, as Lee Kuan Yew quite famously said, to digits, right? Where our value to the country is measured purely in economic output, where we are put in boxes which we don't even identify with, but we're forced to be in boxes, where our salaries are ridiculously low, and we're encouraged to think about, you know, in this very as I think PM Lee Hsien Loong said about, we have to eat other people's lunch, or they will eat our lunch, which is nonsense. You know, you work together to increase to feed everyone, and the rising tide will lift all boats. You know, so I just want to make that point, because I know we're aware of it here, but when people listen, it I think it bears repeating that Singapore dehumanizes everyone. You look at nurses and a starting salary of less 1,900 a month for frontline nurses who are risking their lives. I mean, that's insane,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And so this whole system needs to be reformed, and the migrant workers are just the worst and most obvious and blatant and horrible part of it. But for Singaporeans listening, I urge you to think about yourselves as well and how you've become economic cogs in an unfeeling system.
Right.
Yeah, and
It's exploited to different levels.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like that's what it is. But you know, you're right, and just think about Josephine Theo's salary in 1 month
Yeah.
is what a migrant worker would make in 7 years if we do the math. So that should be enough. That's enough to show how what's the value of human life and in Singapore and how they see this. But I think, PJ, your point is super important because people, we need to be aware of the exploitation that's going on like in our lives and these systems that have only been around really for like what 50 years. A lot of these systems, and
since
we have
the 80s really in Singapore and the
Yeah.
90s for migrant workers. Yeah.
and so we really need to first of all be aware of our history and know like that this has only been like a generation, and like we have like I said this on IG Live the other day, the butterfly effect, right? When people like time travel and you watch a Family Guy and then Stewie and Brian they go back in history and like don't touch anything, everything's gonna be drastically different to like when we go back to the present day, right? Then how come we don't have the same feeling about today? And the fact that the butterfly effect works forwards too. We can do, whether it's small action, whatever we do today is going to have an amplified effect. Someone's going to carry that torch down the line. So we have to do this work right now. Yeah.
You're also doing a project with the substation, right? So
yeah. I love the sub, and look, I mean, they're another art space that's going to lose their physical space like sometime next year. But yeah, I mean, it's a project actually with Beyond Social Services, and it's with a group of boys, really. It's a group of boys who live in Whampoa, in the rental flat community, and we come together just to be vulnerable together, share, love, laugh, cry, just a space for me, I never had that kind of space, and I think masculinity, a lot of like, because we were on a panel together, Kokila actually introduced us, and so we were on a panel, and I was talking to them, I was like, hey, as I learned more about their work, a lot of their work was with women in the community, and then the work was about sexual violence in the communities, and then all that stuff, and I was like, then what is being done with the boys? And they're like, oh, we don't have enough volunteers, like that's across the board, there's not enough people volunteering, young people volunteering in Singapore, but also there's not enough programs. So I was like, hey, I've always wanted to do this kind of work, and I had a syllabus that I put together with a friend, and basically I was like, yeah, let's do it lah. So we've been meeting circuit breaker we took a break, but then from January until like now it's been about a year of us just meeting every Tuesday nights, and then it became Tuesday and Friday, and we just sit down and it's just toolkits of expression. It's about like different ideas of masculinity. I think we spent one whole class talking about the word bitch, and how and the beautiful part about this program is that it's all the boys. The boys have put in the work. We are merely the facilitators. We are just there to kind of shape this a little bit here, cover a little bit there, make sure we bring resources, we rob the rich continuously, and then what we do is just like it's all the boys' stories, it's their lived experience, and we just had a show with the sub who has been so supportive. Thank you, Uzair Raka, everybody there. But so they put together a performance piece. For a lot of them, it's the first time performing, and we lost a lot of the boys in the program to DRC, to like drug, like we lost like a couple of boys. One boy was on tagging, another one went in for 18 months. It's not even 20, like 18 months. The boys are like from 13 to like maybe 18, 19. 18 months, and then it's drug rehab. So like, and you take away those boys from programs like ours, that we are doing the work. So it's tough, but even in that class where we talked about the word bitch, because it's so organic, because one of the boys said it, and we were like, okay, let's set a rule, let's negotiate, let's talk together about this, right? We'll never use the word bitch when we're talking about another human being, especially a woman. Like, why? And then we unpack all of that, and the conclusion that I didn't start the class off as a lesson plan with, but the conclusion, and by the way, the class is co-facilitated with one of my friends from Yale and US, Yanni, and where we got to at the end of the class was that we should never use the word bitch because it's a conversation stopper. It doesn't help the person, it hurts someone, right? But it also doesn't correctly identify what is the feeling that we feel. Like, you have kind of abused my trust. You have let me down in a certain way. I am disappointed because of this action. You don't help someone correct the behavior, or you don't express some what are your expectations about a relationship when you use that word. So for us, it's really like, for me, I learned so much from the boys because those were their conclusions, and I learned from them. So Men with Pens is really, that's what it is. It's just a community project, and I think if people can have capacity to do these things, like, yo, let's actually do community projects that we don't need like money or support. Like, we just need you to go down, have time and just like be consistent about the work, and today those boys are like homies. I love them very much. Yeah, I trust them very, very much.
And coming back to a certain theme we're identifying here, I think it's really good that you have positive male role models, because in Singapore, for so long we've had this extremely toxic male role model who still dominates our lives and imaginations, even though he's been dead 5 years. And how I think that the damage that this one man did to our collective psyches in presenting a male role model that somehow that has been really exalted, but it's so toxic and misogynistic, and inhumane in certain ways. I have to wonder about the damage that has done.
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad to hear that, I think especially for the two of us who've lost our fathers at a young age, to have these space where you can have alternative a male role model, and then discuss these really important issues which you don't actually see discussed everywhere else, because nothing can be discussed in Singapore, right? Everything's too sensitive and dangerous and blah blah blah. So I'm just so pleased to hear about this.
And also importantly is that we are going to, the work is like, starts off with these male spaces for young men to come together, but it's also to collaborate with just youth in general. So the ladies who are doing the work, and to come together as like, Wampokia is what they call themselves. So it's like, it's just to also set the stage for that kind of like, ultimately it's the youth coming together to figure things out, and if we're going to look at alternative modes of problem solving, then we need that kind of resilience in communities. We need spaces where people can come together and like, all right, let's figure this out. We don't need the police involved here. In this case, like, this is someone I know, and they're fine. They're not representing a threat. Like, we got this person. Those kind of, we want to set the groundwork for that kind of alternative modes. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier about young individuals in this program being snatched away by Singapore's penal and carceral system. Right?
Yeah.
And that links to another project or another big issue in Singapore that you've been working on for a long time, which is the death penalty case, especially now with the horrific situation that's unfolding before our eyes. Can you tell us more about that?
I think so. I can't say that I've been a anti-death penalty advocate or anything like that. I just made a song in 2018, and I've been very vocal on my platforms and with my circles. Yeah. Prabhakaran Srivijayan is his name. 2017, he was murdered by the state, and he's a Malaysian, and he maintained his innocence until the end. He always maintained that he didn't know what was in the vehicle, and it was, we have a mandatory maximum here. It's ridiculous that people, when I hear the narrative of people need someone who's already been extracted away from participating in civil society, right? They're already taken away, but you need to murder them for people to feel safe. People have already, like, the state already, you don't, a life imprisonment should be the maximum sentence. There should be, like, the state should not have the right to kill people. That's it. So for me, like, it's just a very straightforward, like, why are we murdering people? Life is the most sacred, beautiful thing. There's always something that someone can contribute. Syed Suhail, who I had the privilege of speaking to his sister yesterday after, like, I was on IG Live, and then we exchanged some DMs. I mean, this man reads Schopenhauer. This man, like, you saw the poetry in how he's writing when he was actually writing that so just so sad to read that letter that he was writing out for a cry for help from M. Ravi. So that is the person we're executing And that if Ravi didn't do anything, and if like civil society didn't like make some noise, I think it's actually all the legal team and the research team, that they are the ones who have worked hard to have a stay of execution and have that like separate hearing that's happening next week. But if they didn't do anything, then on Friday another funeral where basically the funeral will be done right now. Are you kidding me? The family wasn't even informed and for so many hours, and everybody had to say their goodbyes. I mean, come on, like it's ridiculous. And like, it's 2020, we're talking about this. But yes, okay, so be it. It's 2020, we are talking about this. But just understand that in the next 5 years, right? 5 years ago, that 5 years is like about 10% of Singapore's like I guess our post-independence history. That's 10%. The next 5 years, right, we are in a space that's so small that our activism does count, does matter. Us doing small actions have an amplified effect. We are all uniquely positioned to have these conversations at our dining tables, at our jobs and everything. And what about Apple Music? Or what about this Apple store that they set up, shiny, brand new Apple stores? What does Apple believe? Where are the corporations here who make so much money from this country? Where are y'all? Right? How much do y'all pay your migrant workers? What are your stance on these issues? I want to know. You can't just hide behind look, iPhone 12, And because people are allowed in this country to stand up and line up in hordes to buy the latest iPhone or buy the latest branded whatever t-shirt or shorts or whatever. But if 5 people gather to hold a candlelight vigil, what happens? So in service of capitalism, okay. In service of people and just humanity, yep. You get, like, as Jolivin explained in the last one of the previous podcasts, years and years of being harangued by the state to try to tire you out, but we are not tired because this is the leaderless movement. So for me, back to like death penalty and capital punishment, it is like the most urgent thing we must do. We must abolish the death penalty. This is when I spoke to Syed's sister, and I'm sure they won't mind me sharing this, but when he wrote that letter, he wrote it for not just himself, but everybody who is also on death row, and their majority, like disproportionately, they are Malay men, Indian men on death row, and a lot of them are migrant vulnerable populations. Like, people need rehab. This is a mental health, it's a public health issue.
This is a theme that we've mentioned several times on this podcast on New Narrative, and I think even with Jolivin just 2 weeks ago, such a huge problem that for example, as you mentioned, minorities are overwhelmingly people in prison for drug offences, on death row. We can't talk about it. We can't have proper conversations. We don't know the numbers, and so this is always the big issue with dealing with these issues, is that we come against a state which cares more about efficiency, which is so cold and unfeeling, which won't even allow us to have conversations. I could understand if the government's position is, okay, we must have death penalty, but then as citizens, you can go ahead and talk all you want, advocate, lobby. That's your responsibility as a citizen.
Correct.
But instead, we have a government which shuts down these conversations, and which even rushes into executions. And if I remember correctly, they even deviated from the standard Friday morning execution at some point to try and prevent more activism and advocacy, to try and save a certain...
it was Koja Bing, right?
Yeah. And I mean, can you imagine a state rushing to murder someone for the sake of efficiency because they don't like what a bunch of citizens are saying? I mean, I thought our state was so powerful and strong, and they don't even have the moral courage to stick to their guns. So I think this is the most important thing, that we need to be able to have these conversations to start with, right? And if the state wants to say the majority of people support the death penalty, well, then give us the chance to talk about it and change people's minds, right? If that's the path you want to go. But then you're also then implying that democracy, right? Majority of people want death penalty, so we should have death penalty. Well, then what about all the other things that a majority of people want?
Correct.
Right? An Indian prime minister, for example. We don't get all of that. Why is it in this one thing suddenly democracy is so important? So again, conversations. And so what you're doing is really important, getting the message out. We all need to keep doing that, because I think that's the only avenue we have right now.
And
I mean, bouncing off of that, right? I mean, I noticed that one of the big parts of your activism is conversation, setting up spaces, and you yourself, you're a brilliant orator, like I'm just here kind of listening to you go off on these tangents, delivering almost like a lecture, right? That to me is amazing, right? That micro political level of having discussions with people, being armed with the information and the ideas, right? So I want to get a little bit into your ideas, because you are a thinker, you have an ideology, you have 4 dominoes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think so. For me, this is like high praise, and I'm like, I listen to y'all all the time, and so I think that first of all, thank you, and second of all, also this is formed, like who I am today is formed through conversation. It's through being wrong. It's through failing a lot of the times, but so I think it's not like you have to have done certain things or went to certain schools. No. It's a lot of times it's despite those things, right? But so I think it's really important to put there, and all it starts is just us to try to say something, to read up, to learn, to articulate. So I have a mantra in life, and that's to leave a place in a better state than how I entered it. So, life is not guaranteed. I just want to make a contribution towards certain things, and I have 4 main pillars lah, I guess.
Okay.
I call them dominoes because number one is like a lot of if those things fall, it takes a lot of work to get there. But if we can push those things, a lot of other things would automatically align in civil society to kind of to form that larger picture of whatever that utopia might be,
So what are these 4 dominoes?
Okay, so number 1, we must abolish the death penalty.
All right.
Number 2 is NS. We have to abolish NS. So these are my personal opinions. Okay, so abolish death penalty, abolish NS, abolish 377A, and have a universal basic income and a minimum wage for everybody, not just Singaporeans. This is not some Lim Tian vibe. This is for everybody in this country. And these are just my opinions. What PJ said earlier, we must have conversations around these things. So I don't know better. I don't know better than the next person. But all I know is that here's what I believe, and here's where, as someone who's participating in this country, as a human being, as a citizen, as whatever, we need to be able to have space for you to tell me what you feel about these things without the fear of I cannot say because my job say cannot say, I signed a contract, that kind of thing. Or cannot be no, because I have government this, I want that, so what? Government services need y'all to work. Without the people, they won't function. They need to do those jobs. So my thing is they cannot use that jobs as leverage to stop you exercising your human right to that, to expressing yourselves in that way, especially when the expression is literally just us sitting down talking, whether it's organizing a Skype session or whether it's sitting down talking on IG. So my point is that here's what I think I want to do work towards contributing. In my time in this life, I just want to do that work and inspire other people to also be thinking, talking, and mobilizing towards tearing down these archaic, oppressive systems that disproportionately affect the lowest of incomes, the people who are the most in need of help. Right. So and everything actually links back to this whether it's making music, whether it's creating space, whether it's listening and shutting up and just okay, cool.
I massively resonate with this idea that a big part of activism is micropolitics. It's the conversations that you have, because I myself am very lucky to have met very great orators, very great people who came into arguments and really changed my mind and shifted my perspective, and that always works, I think, a little bit better than reading a book or going to a lecture, right? Because that hits you on a personal level. You can clarify with the person. They can tailor the argument to who you are, right? So I guess the question that I want to ask here is that you're coming into every discussion, right? You seem to come into every discussion well armed, right? You know the arguments backwards, forwards. You know how to tailor them. How do you prepare? How do you build up this skill of being this excellent conversationalist, this excellent debater? What are some of the philosophical, ideological references that you take and pluck from to practice your arguments?
Wow, actually it goes back to the scale of the everyday. Yeah, so it's not I don't listen to anybody on how to, YouTube has these how to win every argument. I don't really care. I stay far away. Do not recommend YouTube. I don't want to know this, because that's an outcome oriented approach to approaching a conversation. I'm sitting here caring about the process of how we relate. You know, I'm gonna leave this today thinking about how I felt. You know, feeling safe sitting between two men who I have a great amount of respect for, and like, you know, so I think it's like that feeling of like, okay, that we were here, we were able to touch on these topics, we were able to use this platform in a certain way. It's always about the process for me. So for me, like, hearing that is actually like kind of surreal for me as someone who never had the language to speak or articulate when I was younger, you know. And it's really through a lot of listening. It's really through a lot of like, it's the resources are there. So if you're someone who I didn't go and take a course or take anything like that. It's really just about understanding how people speak on everyday level. Like a lot of the juxtapositions that we juggle requires the code switch. So, you know, the way we speak to different people has to be different. That's a skill, you know, and that's something that takes having those conversations. It takes being wrong in terms of like being wrong sometimes about pronouns, and learning and committing to doing better. So I think it's not just simple like I need you to believe something, but rather I genuinely believe that like, hey, you have experiences that I will never have had, and we just need to be able to sit down and have space to discuss those things. And really the outcomes don't matter, because most of the times in our micro level, like, outcomes can't really change much. But what we can make people feel is like that whatever we're moving towards is open-ended enough for them to have space to be vulnerable, for them to have space to be honest, and to not be like constantly posturing to be right, but rather just be like, okay, let's get to the crux. Let's get to some underlying assumptions that maybe we both have, and let's bring in more voices, because like ultimately a lot of times like it will be like a group of men talking about how to be better as men, without actually listening, without actually like having women involved. But how do you do that in a way that doesn't place the burden on people? You know, so I think all those things, if we just really start caring and like really start thinking of ourselves as like, not just I need something from you, but I really genuinely care about how you're going to feel after this. I want to check in with you, and so that's really helped me be better at the work that I do. But I will say also, gosh, I've lost so many friends, you know, in doing the kind of work that I do, and I've and having these difficult conversations. It's and some positions that I take, like, you know, I have to be better at communicating like difference. So yeah, it's not like easy, and it takes work, but yeah, we're here to like help each other as we it's hard.
Yeah, and I think what I really love about your approach is it also strikes at the very heart of what is governance and what is democracy and what is society, and how we conceive of how we collectively come to conclusions as a society as a whole, right? Because in Singapore and in this very technocratic, as they like to call it, state, where they try and depoliticize, which is of course all nonsense, right? All political decisions are by definition political, in that they've come from certain values and they involve trade-offs. But because we're so obsessed with the right decision from the very top, and I think as a broader public, we've become very obsessed with what is the right policy, what is the right decision. But really, it's not there is no right and wrong in many of these things, but rather that, and also the policy has to come from what you want to achieve collectively as a society. So it's more important that we are able to communicate and discuss openly and honestly and talk about the values we have collectively to get to the policy, than the policy itself.
Correct.
You know, and so it's this whole obsession with efficient outcomes, efficient decision making, neoliberalism, but also this idea, mixed up authoritarianism, and this sort of patriarchal leadership, which just wants to tell us what to do. But also us as a society, I think we need to change our values, change how we think of decision making, change how we think of governance, right? In terms of, as you're describing, collectively coming to decisions through dialogue, where we respect all opinions, where we make sure everyone's represented in the decision-making process, and focus on this process rather than outcomes,
Of
win or
course.
lose the debate, you know?
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is fantastic. And it sounds, I mean, it's a really good framework for thinking about how do we improve our societies. And this then comes to this other thing, which, you know, people often feel like there's no alternative to how the PAP does things. But you here, right, articulating an alternative, you're actually putting it into action, and all these are really powerful. And yeah, I'm really excited to hear all these things.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that's the role of our elected officials should be really to create that space, to kind of like do the dirty work, do the groundwork, to have people like and their voices represented. It's not just every 6 years, you know, like you talk about these things, but it's really hard work. It's supposed to be hard work, right? So I think that's where we have to demand that from the people that we vote to put in office. That's the fundamental tenet of like how of democracy, really.
It's coming back to something you said earlier. Actually, it reminds me that leadership as facilitation, right? Where, you know, you talk about coming to this group of boys, and you are just facilitators. They do the work.
Yeah.
Same thing. Our leaders come to us as citizens, right, and responsible members of society, and their job really is to facilitate.
Correct.
They're not to dictate.
Yes. Yeah, and to recognize that human beings are the infrastructure, and that's a Simone Abdul Malik like urban studies like thing, you know. And so everything is like linked to like a lot of like actually readers that people have read, like the scale of everyday life is a Jane Jacobs kind of idea, you know, about thinking about the city. So I would urge everybody to like, you know, engage with if sometimes just watch a lecture or something about urban studies, urban planning. It really helps us think, because it's Lee Kuan Yew was influenced by Le Corbusier. And Le Corbusier's like rational city plan, and you Google and read about like Pruitt-Igoe. It's a failed like a project, a housing project. So, and then look at how HDBs are built and the legacy of how like city planning has like created these policies like the ethnic integration program that kind of like creates a Chinese majority in every part of this country, but under the guise of racial harmony. So there's a lot of things that will link, and I think we have to I mean, if anybody wants to like engage with this material, like DM, leave a comment, and we can talk, you know. But going back to the idea of facilitation, right, and human beings as infrastructure, I think like, look, a lot of these MPs have teams like of researchers that are like some of the best like young like minds that they get, and president scholars, and doing all this work that they present as theirs. And then later they don't even get paid a lot. Like, I know people who have been on research teams for MPs, and they don't even get really paid a lot. And then next thing you know, like an MP is going and presenting something in Parliament and saying something. So how much of that work is actually like done, like the leg work, the tough research work, and like listening and time spent is done beyond like photo ops, you know?
I think, yeah, I'm just really shocked to hear this, because
Yeah.
like, MPs are paid so much. It's the whole premise of why because they're worth it, because they do all this. So the people doing the work for them then should be paid even more.
Correct. And this is their allowance. So that's money that they have to invest in the work, and that's on top of their salary. So, but my point is that if we see leadership as facilitation, then it's really about not like creating space, but also about recognition of work, and it's about paying people for that work, and so people, if people step up, if people should have the right to step up in the spaces that they live in to build like the whatever space they like, you know, and to and it shouldn't. I just think it's ridiculous that like even community gardens get policed and managed, and like it's yeah.
I mean, one thing that I want to sort of, you know, just sort of point out, because I think this has been an insightful, just a wonderful discussion, right? You know, one of the things that I'm noticing is that a lot of the, you know, you're the third young activist that we're speaking to, right? And I notice a sort of nice consistent trend here, you know, with our first guest, Fidelity. She did history as a kind of storytelling. That was kind of what she was thinking of, right? With Loon, she's very interested in poetry and literature as a means of resisting and creating something new. And for you, it's discourse, poetry, rap, right? So I think the power of the voice is something that's really coming up, something that's really being recognized by the young activists. And there is a certain magic to it. There is a certain charm, you know. I just looked at my watch just now, and I realized that it's been like how many hours, and I could just listen listen to it because you're a very, very good orator. You have that music that's out there. You produce stuff with your voice that's creative and magical and nice to listen to, right? And that directly contrasts the codified, bureaucratic, stiff, stuffy, dead, robotic system, right?
Yeah.
So I think for many reasons, and for ethical reasons, for political and pragmatic reasons, but also for aesthetic reasons, right? For beautiful reasons, for the reasons of having a life that's just more colorful, right? The voice is such a powerful tool to leverage, and I'm just I'm just really amazed, at all of the work that's being done right now. So I mean, we're going to continue this conversation definitely at a coffee shop or something, but we probably quite overrun. But yes, thank you so much for coming on.
Hold on, time out. I do have one more question.
Oh, yeah.
And it's actually a very personal one.
Yeah.
If you can indulge me.
Mm-hmm.
As a minority at Chinese High, right? Because actually in this whole podcast we haven't talked about race, which is like the sort of ultra uber biggest problem in Singapore in terms of the fact that it affects everything we do and we can't talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's so insidious. And as a minority student at Chinese High, you mentioned you wanting to drop out of school, you mentioned getting in trouble with the authorities. And this is deeply personal to me because my son is at Catholic High, which is a traditionally Chinese school. And from what I understand, he is one of only, I think, 3 non-Chinese
Still, yeah.
people in his year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's and as someone who's half Chinese, half Filipino, he gets teased a lot, and I've seen him go from loving learning to hating school with a passion, and his mother and I are wits' end at what to do. And I thought, and I'm curious how you dealt with this, how you dealt with being a minority in one of the most, passionately Chinese schools in Singapore, and sort of as an entryway to thinking about the role of the how we deal with race, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, what's your personal story, if I may ask that?
Sure. So I think if I had a fifth domino, it would be the SAP schools. That's sick. It's sick how resources are so unevenly distributed. I went to Newtown Sec, by Dover and Clementi's a school that I love. So I went to Newtown Sec, and coming from there, the only reason I even got a chance to go to Hwa Chong is not even like my choice. It was really the basketball teacher in charge and my dad at the time who like, no, Subhas, you have to go here because this is like the best school in Singapore. And it's because I was like on the national youth setup. So it's if I couldn't shoot a 3, if I couldn't like jump and dunk a basketball, I would
Chinese
never.
High, traditionally basketball school.
Yeah,
so that's how you.
That's how I got in, and like 2 championships, I was a captain on those teams, and I know. And at some point, it was a political act for me to stop playing basketball, because I didn't want to wear Singapore flag here, but then go home to a reality where like, what is Singapore? What is Singapore? Where is like, what about my family? Like we go through trauma and shit every day, and I see the lives of the people around me, and I see like as I start to learn about these things, like the death penalty in this country, NS, like this and that, I'm like, what is that relation to like place? So for me, like that was a political act to stop playing basketball when I got to university, but to just like play in a level that I was building with my friends and not like to represent Singapore. But also at Hwa Chong, I was one of the only same story as your kid. Me, Tharman Shanmugaratnam's 2 sons, and a few other Malay women were the only like non-Chinese folk in the school, and the cleaning staff and the service staff. That was the only thing. So it's all the way sick. It's like like a Black Mirror episode sometimes. That's the vibe, because you had no counselors who were brown, and when I say brown, I mean like working class, like primarily working class Tamil and Malay like folk lah. You had no counselors who would be able to relate to experience. All you had were career guidance counselors. You didn't have actual counselors who would be able to like help you. And so it's really that it was a it was just a 2 years where, and JC is also very short a period of time, so it's like you're in and out, you know, and you just do well and they push you through. But I knew that I had to finesse this. I knew that because the school was taking my talent, right? Like, you think that they don't put that gold medal, they're not eligible to certain grants or whatever on an institutional level because they won these sports awards, and the amount of money, like we had the opportunity to travel to play. I mean, I don't think I went, but then we had money to travel overseas to like play. We had like sports equipment like Nike, Adidas. When I was at Newtown Sec, I wore the same Queensway Shopping Centre $70 shoe until it broke, and then tape it up and let's go, we're ready to roll. So it was like, that was so much culture shock, but it's so much inequality because I went to school with like the son of like I mean, I probably shouldn't say, but anyway, the point is like with the most elite, like the next generation of the elite class in Singapore. So for me, and this is a message to everybody watching also, because I've had a conversation with people on IG Live and DMs about this, but take notes. We are going to in some way be in institutions that you know, it's part of the hustle. We may need to work in a corporation to just put food on the table and hustle. That's fine. Take notes. If you're in these situations where, like, you know, if you're a minority who's in Hwa Chong, like, keep writing, keep finding ways to kind of crystallize that lived experience, because things will make sense and things will all come full circle. And we have overcome bigger things than what we're facing right now. And there are people who have come before us who also have had these experiences. So I think it's really important to engage. That's why it's really important to share and be vulnerable. But the point is, like, being in a school like that, like as a young person, you immediately have to kind of align and use as a barometer, like your value, your version of success or whatever you want to do, right, is to be like aligned to what everybody else is doing and has to conform to that, and you don't really have a license to kind of deviate from that, because I mean, and the funny thing is, like, Hwa Chong is it's a communist school. and then today we have you know the Jollivan was wearing the smiley t-shirt, the youth who were carrying the signs, I mean, they went to Hwa Chong. Like one of the youth went to Hwa Chong, and then Hwa Chong also sent out a message. I'm embarrassed to be from Hwa Chong, really, to be real with you. I don't go out here, oh yo, Hwa Chong, like, so what, yeah? Like, I went from Newtown Sec. That's what I say. Yeah. So my point is, like, the thing is, like, Hwa Chong sent out an email last year, I don't know if you all saw. Yeah. Like, asking people to basically silence themselves from, like, speaking about this because it's sensitive. Then what are you equipping young minds for? Yeah. Like, academic freedom, again, is a marketing and branding tool. Yeah. You see that across the board in the education system. So I would say, we really, like, schools like that, like, I don't, like, it's just to put on that sponsored mobility pathway to, like, elitism in Singapore. It was crazy being in Hwa Chong, but I knew my place, and I don't mean that in I know that I'm lesser or something. I knew my place because I knew what I was going to use that 2 years for, and that's just to take finesse. There's a quote that I got in a little bit of trouble for recently, but it wasn't my quote, but I shared it. It's the only relationship you can have with the institution is a criminal one. So if you're a young person watching this, you have power. The most power you'll have as a time as like a person living in this country is probably when you are protected by the campus or university, or where they have to answer first before you. So mobilize, go out there. Want to do a sit-in? Talk about it. Think about it. You know, figure it out. Like, have your voice heard. Write a research paper about death penalty advocacy. Do it. Force your class to talk about these important issues. Force your professors to mark those papers. Force your school to bring you in and sit you in. Record them. Do all those things. Right? I mean, can't give away too much, so hit me up. But the point is, like, we have to do the work now. If not, like, how are we even going to raise young people? How are we going? What about Wampokia? What about their lives? What about the lives of Syed Suhail, his family? What about the lives of migrant workers who are in Singapore? What about us? What about you and me? Where are we going to be? You know, what's the point of all this? Yeah, I don't know. So thanks for your question. And
thanks for your answer. It actually that really helps. It's given me a lot to think about. Yeah. So I guess on that note, we've really gone on a long time. So thank you so much for your time. Really grateful to.
Thanks so much for coming on. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you, Sean, for co-hosting as always. Excellent
my pleasure
questions.
Always. Yeah.
Okay, and thank you as always to all of you listening for joining us once again on Political Agenda.